It's great to be here at Elum today, and I trust that you folks who have been viewing this show have really appreciated what Frank has brought to the table. What a wealth of information and what perspectives on history and America's technological heritage he has brought. In our day and age, we have just simply blown by the history of the American Railroad. Just for an example, we don't even remember that in 1929 there were 20,000 daily passenger trains. Here in Elum, Milwaukee Road was bringing its fair share of eastbounds and westbounds, and all of that to complement the freight traffic. Well, what you saw in these interviews with Frank, and what you saw and heard in his enthusiasm, is a window on what America had and what we threw away. This is looking back to the past, and I, as an artist, have the opportunity to look back as well as at the present, as well as the future. So being here today is giving me an opportunity to think back to what the railroad meant to the American scene, to the sense of place that it brought to our citizenry, to the sense of hope that it brought, particularly after the hell of the Depression and so on. Well, I make a few comments about some of the beauty that was a part of the railroad scene. Again, this is something that we have forgotten, and something very unique to the Milwaukee story. When electrification was put into place, it was done here in two sections. Avery, Idaho to Harlingen, Montana. That's about a 440-mile section east of here. And then this electrified division over the Coast Range, roughly 220 miles from Othello, Washington, to Tacoma and Seattle. When Milwaukee started that electrification, it was like nothing anyone had ever seen. It was the largest mainline electrification in the world. In a utilitarian fashion, many of the locomotives that were used originally were what was known as box cabs. They were really like boxes painted black with wheels under them and a pantograph that touched the wire. Nothing terribly exciting artistically. But then the Milwaukee Road contracted with General Electric, and they created the bipolar electrics. And you see this model here. They were never painted green on the Milwaukee, but seeing this model could give you an idea of the fact that nobody had ever seen a design like this. Here in this panel, we have a little bit later version of the bipolars, and they were called bipolar simply because there were two electrical poles that were mounted on the frame of the locomotive, and the armature for the motor was mounted on the axle. These things were quiet, they were fast, they were eye-catching, and they turned the nation's focus to what railroading could be. 1920, when this Pacific extension was electrified. The bipolars were so popular, in fact, that Lionel Model Trains built a small version of this, and they were exceedingly popular. So just the fact of the toy trains putting this image of a future kind of rail mobility in front of people drew all kinds of attention. And it drew not just attention here domestically, but worldwide as well. So beauty drew people. There are countless accounts of people from the Far East as well as Europe coming to study this Milwaukee Road electrification. And if you look around the world today, the countries of Europe and Asia are the leaders in rail electrification. We had it originally, and it's a shame that we threw it away because of the utilitarianism and the availability of private automobiles and the individualism that has so characterized Western the whole of our Western society. Well, the points that I want to make here today are those of the artist. I want you as the viewer to take what Frank has articulated from a technical side and to put it in this greater context of what the railroad meant, means, and yet could mean for our country. One of the chief industrial designers of the high point of American rail travel post-World War II was Brooks Stevens. And this Milwaukee Road poster epitomizes Brooks Stevens' industrial design. These sky-top lounge cars, nobody had ever seen this. Same way nobody had ever seen the bipolar electrics. Stevens not only designed the train, he designed the graphics and the colors and the detailing on the locomotives as well. I don't have a picture of that right here, but the engines were made by Fairbanks Morse. And Brooks Stevens brought an incredible amount of ingenuity to this task, which was interesting because a lot of railroads did not want some of the details that industrial designers brought because it's too much for them to take care of. And they pulled off some of the streamlining or off some of the details. But these cars, these trains, gave the Milwaukee a presence. And it's a case of being and interacting with beauty. Not only did the trains take you to the beauty, but they were evident of it as well. And this is something that has slipped from our Western mind. If you mention rail and Europe or rail and Asia, people respond talking about the beauty of the equipment as well as the scenery. And as I said a few minutes ago, we had that here, and then we threw it away in the name of progress. But was it? Not necessarily. So we look ahead as well as look to the past. What Frank has done today in introducing all the technical side and the personal side of what it meant to be a substation operator, it gave you and me a window on this part of our culture. We've seen it all go away. There are no 20,000 passenger trains today. We could sure benefit from some additional ones. But you know, the electrification idea, combined with the importance of the passenger train and the freight train, is having a resurgence. And I have the pleasure at times to produce artwork that tells that story. A couple of items just to make the point. There's a think tank on Vashon Island called Solutionary Rail. And these folks are looking at the importance of re-electrifying our mainline railroads, passenger and freight included. Part of their plan would be to have the railroads' rights of way also be the rights of way for transmission lines to bring power and other electric services to areas that don't have it right now. But it's a combining of ideas. These were not individuals who started out looking at rail, but they sure developed it because they could see the importance of rail to an environmental sensitivity and awareness. So the ideas of solutionary rail are broad. One of the other clients that I've worked with is the High Speed Rail Alliance out of Chicago. This rendering is really somewhat present, not just future, but it shows lines south of downtown Chicago in an electrified capacity, which they are now, but it shows new facilities, stations, and new kinds of trains. And similarly, this piece shows us the new international terminal, the proposed international terminal at O'Hare Airport, and below it is the high-speed rail line. This is the first illustration that any of us were aware of that actually showed how rail could be a part of the airport facility, and that's just at O'Hare. These kinds of discussions are happening. Also, there's a think tank group in Western Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh called Pop-Up Metro, and they're using electrification now, this time battery powered, for regional commuter passenger services. These are ideas that are being generated out of a need to have a more environmentally friendly transportation system. But it goes beyond environment. It's also, I'll come back to it again, the importance of beauty. Our culture lacks that. And to build this bridge again to what beauty brought to our transportation systems and enabled us to better connect with our communities and our natural world, this is happening again in this 21st century. So the hope is that what Frank shared with you in a way can be repeated. We can't go back and reshape history. We can learn from it, and as we move forward, we take from the past and move that and learn from it and add it into our future development. So the electrification as a technology is something that is being talked about more and more, and I have shared these pieces to show you that as an example. So it's my hope that as a nation, we would be embracing these recastings, so to speak, of technological high points. And what Frank experienced could happen in a new way that would give us more transportation options and a much better connection with our world. Thanks a lot.